Let's look at electric guitar mic placement. So this is going to be pretty typical of any electric guitar setup or electric guitar amp. And one really handy thing is to have a flashlight and to point that at, put it right up to the face of the amp, and then you can really see the speaker and the cone. And what we're typically going to want to do is point the mic flat with the speaker. Some people will tilt it out just a little bit. It changes the response slightly. But a good starting place is flat with the speaker, not quite touching the cloth. That way you don't get any noise from the cloth rubbing against the face of the microphone. So you want it basically as close as you can get it without it actually touching. And then it's pointed just off the center of that, the bump in the center of the speaker cone, right? So you can see kind of, it's maybe a little hard to tell in the video, but it's not pointed directly at that center. It's just off center a little bit from the speaker cone. If we look at another example, this other amp down here, you'll see the same kind of thing. Only this time it's on this side. Typically amps are symmetric and it really doesn't matter which side, but you notice it's just off center of the speaker cone. And that's going to be a great starting point for miking an electric guitar amp. Now let's look at miking a drum kit. So we'll start with the kick drum mic, and depends on which mic you're using, but if you're using the Audix D6, that's this mic here you can see, kind of a black cylinder. And for this mic, we want it to be all the way in the hole, so you can see the back of it is kind of in line with the head. And we want it pointed directly at the beater. And that will get a nice kick sound. It'll get both the body as well as the attack of the kick. And then for tom mics, we want those pointed about 2 inches in from the rim at a fairly steep angle, right, with relation to the drum head. And you can see both of these are set that way. Then for the snare, we're going to be a little bit flatter in the approach. Now this particular drum is a little bit steeper than I would typically do it. A lot of times this mic will come over here and be not angled down quite so much, but angled across a little bit more. And this is true of both toms and snare. The more that you point across the drum, the more attack and bright sounding you're going to get. And the more you point down toward the rim, the near rim, the more body and resonance you're going to get. So that's why we've got these tom mics pointed kind of close to the rim, right, the near side, whereas the snare mic is pointed, this particular one's pointed kind of right in the center, but the snare mic is pointed more across the snare versus down right at the near side. You want a little bit more attack, pop, snap, brightness out of the snare than what we're trying to get out of the toms. Now we still want some out of the toms too. We don't want it to go away completely, but we want a lot of resonance out of the toms. And then different people will do bottom snare mic differently. We like to do it as much as we can as a mirror image of the top mic. So again, I don't think I said this, but we're actually If we're using a 57, we want the grill of the 57 to be in line with the rim. So just like this right here, where this front part is hanging over the rim of the snare. Same on the bottom. And then the other thing that's actually kind of a surprising, you may not think it matters, is we actually want the mics to be in line with the snares. So this snare is turned correctly because here's the tensioner. So the snares run right through here like this. So these mics are in line with the snares. I can see if I can get a shot from underneath. Oh yeah, look at that. So there's the snares, and you can see our mic is as much as possible in line with those snares. And it actually changes the tone of what your mics are picking up and how the snare drum comes through the system. So you want to get those snares lined up with the microphones. Hi-hats is actually, it's a mic that we kind of add to taste. We've chosen to do this one this way just to save space, honestly. Really having a boom mic and kind of coming over and pointing down is a little bit more effective, but we were running out of room. So we went with this setup. Because this SM81 has a really long body, we can make it work. Then lastly are the overheads. For overheads, we want them spaced over the cymbals and the toms. But the other thing about overheads is we actually want them equidistant from the center of the snare. So pull out a cable or some string or something, run a line from the center of the snare up to the face of the microphone, and then pinch that point and come across to the other mic and see where it lands. And then adjust one or the other so that they're both the same distance from the center of the snare. And that way you get a nice clean snare sound, because what'll happen is if these mics, if the snare sound hits those mics at different times, you actually get a smearing of the snare sound, right? So it reaches, you hit the snare, pop, it reaches one mic and comes through the system, and then a few milliseconds later it reaches the other mic and comes through the system. So rather than getting pop, you get pop, or puh, puh, rather than pop. And so we want to get those two guys equal distance away from that snare so that you get that nice clean snare tone.